Well, welcome. We've actually got to the time when it's the 100th Black History Conversation session. Can't believe that we've got this far. Then we're going to take a break for a couple of weeks. I'm Liz Millman from Learning Links International, and I'll be introducing a range of exciting folks who've arrived to join us to celebrate today. So that's really, really beautiful. So we're going to get going now. And we'll do some introductions in a moment to our special guests and welcome our special guests. I found the logo of the University of York. Melissa, I hope you're impressed by that. It's not quite the normal one. It's a special one that was done for April 1st a few years ago with this special duck that became a pet of students and staff at the University of York. So as tomorrow's April the 1st, and for me it'll be April the 1st before I finish this session. That'll be fun. So I'm joining you from Melbourne, Australia. So Melissa Williams has very kindly joined us, and she's going to tell us about the historical context of the Windrush scandal and the impact on the Windrush descendants' sense of belonging in the UK. So we're really looking forward to that, Melissa. We've also got June Elizabeth Whitesmith Gulley, who's going to do her presentation on Black history. So we're really looking forward to that. So I'm just going to move on now. We've got a number of other guests, though, that we're going to be introducing and celebrating. So because I'm here in Australia, the protocol here is that at the beginning of any meeting, no matter what sort of a meeting it is, someone like me, who's not of Aboriginal heritage, can do an acknowledgement of country. Had we got anybody with us, but it's late at night here, so I don't usually get many Australians joining us, they might be able to do a welcome to country. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, and I pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions, and the culture of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across the nation. And there's some good stuff going on at the moment about better recognition and better support and better engagement of the wonderful peoples who are from the Aboriginal communities in the Torres Strait Islands. Thank you. Now, we're also remembering that we're still within the International Decade of People of African Descent. And we're going to, at some stage, probably towards the end of season 9, that's be next summer for people who are in the UK, we'll be looking at what's happened, what progress has been during this time, because this has been a time when there's been a lot going on. Now, for the first time, I'm going to try a different acknowledgement. We talked about this a little while ago, and we've been testing out wording over several sessions in different Zoom meetings. But on this, the 100th session of Black History Conversations, I present an apology, and I acknowledge the injustice of the actions taken by the British and other European countries to invade and take possession of the lands of the Caribbean islands, as well as the continents of North and South America. Now, in addition, I recognise with deep sadness the exploitation of Africa by the European colonial powers that destabilised the nations and peoples of this great continent and so many other parts of the world in the centuries of colonialisation. So I'm just going to stop sharing now so we can see who's joining us. That's really wonderful. And Garrick, I don't know if you want to say anything at this time.
No, not immediately. We've got a number of speakers that we're keen to hear their contributions. So I'd like the time spent just ensuring that at least there's a contribution from all of our speakers. Just to say, currently I'm in the Central Library in Liverpool, and this is the area where the archives of the Pennant family history sits. So I've been able to look at some of that material, and I have sent an email to our researcher at Cardiff University, Lisa, forget her surname, just to let her know that this material exists. And also there are families living in Liverpool that's related to the pennant. So she needs to come and spend some time here.
Definitely. This is a project that's going on with the Jamaica-Wales Alliance, looking at the history of the shared history of the Pennant family from North Wales and Jamaica. So that's brilliant, Garrick. Thank you very much indeed. Right, I'm just going back to my PowerPoint just for a moment, just to recognise, as this is the 100th session. We started in October 2020 during the time of COVID. And we just started as a month-long opportunity to really put on a Black History conference. But then we carried on. So it has been a time of terrific change for us all. And we have to remember the murder of George Floyd, not that we'll ever forget, and so many others who were killed in the US. But that has changed things considerably in terms of the things that are being done to recognise the injustices that have been perpetrated over the years. Now, the Black History Conversations was established by myself from Learning Links International. Here I am with some colleagues here, and special memory of the wonderful Chris Campbell, who sadly is no longer with us, but Chris was a great supporter, and he and his lovely wife used to join us most weeks in the first few seasons. And Yasser Safari, my colleague from Jamaica, also joined us then. So Simon Fringo from Belong Nottingham. Belong Nottingham supports migrants in Nottingham, and it's been going since 2000. And we're very, very grateful to you, Simon, because without you organising the IT behind it all, then we'd not have been as successful, and it wouldn't have been as easy as it has been, because I have to say it's been a fascinating, considering it's a difficult subject we're talking about. It's been really good. Also, David Alston, the author of Slaves and Highlanders, was one of our supporters. But now we're supported by lots of other people, including the Windrush Allies Network, Justice for Windrush Generations, and the Black History Walks Network. Okay, so these are just two folks. Now, Jean Samuel has just put a message in the chat to say he's had to finish his lunchtime break, but Jean Samuel, for the whole of the first season, every week shared paintings of his, and over the other seasons he has. And Yasser Safari, my colleague there, who is in Jamaica, he's in Jamaica now, the founder of the Jamaica Poetry Festival. 2016, he was in Wales, and that's one of the posters of the activities he was doing in Wales. So let's see now where we are. Right, well, we're going to stop sharing now. And I'm going to, first of all, these lovely moments on Zoom, first of all, going to ask Jeff, when he's got his cup of coffee and he's sitting down comfortably, Professor Sir Jeff Palmer, it's my absolute delight that you've joined us on this auspicious occasion. You've been a real hero of ours over the last years as you've campaigned up there in Edinburgh. So over to you, Jeff. That's just beautiful.
Thank you very much for that kind remarks, Liz. You know, you've done a wonderful job. You know, 100. It's like cricket, you know, it's a century. And I'm so pleased because you started this thing off and not knowing where it was going, and it has survived and, you know, has done a wonderful job in terms of enlightening people of this history, which now that enlightenment, now the Guardian is now saying, you know, they were involved in slavery. Their owner was a cotton merchant, and they're now looking at, you know, reparation And also the Mayor of London is now looking at a memorial to the slave trade. So the little drip drip is now having a wide effect on the whole country. And what I'm going to just tell you about is a little that's been going on here, which has been extremely significant up until even 2 weeks ago. And it's a story where you're going to get resistance now, and that resistance is starting in ways that we have to be aware of. And I will mention one or two aspects of that. Now, one of the things I said a long time ago was, we shouldn't remove statues. There was a view that we should take down statues, etc. And my view was that if you remove the evidence, you remove the deed. And therefore, taking down, the built environment like that, which was put up to celebrate, the fact is that people should be reminded that's exactly why they did it. And therefore, the view is that we should put up truthful plaques telling the truth of a statue, not the plaque that was originally put on it. And I convinced Edinburgh Council, along with another colleague, that the statue in the middle of Edinburgh, which is called Henry Dundas, if I put the case to you, you've heard of William Wilberforce, but have you heard of Henry Dundas? And if you don't say, yes, you've heard of books, then you know nothing about Wilberforce. Because in 1791, the Prime Minister Pitt encouraged Wilberforce to put in a bill to get the slave trade abolished immediately. Immediately. They knew exactly what the slave trade was doing. It was destroying families. It was providing slaves to replace, in the Caribbean, to replace slaves who had a lifespan of less than 10 years. That's why you need a trade. You're replacing people who are dying in average less than 10 years. Britain was transporting about 40,000 African people a year. And therefore, they came to the conclusion that it should be stopped. But what Henry Dundas did, who was probably the second most powerful man in the empire, next to the Prime Minister, Henry Dundas, a Scot, and he has got nicknames, His nickname was the uncrowned King of Scotland, Henry the Ninth. Henry the Ninth. And therefore, he manipulated, and this is critical, the debate, and said that slave trade should be abolished gradually. And that word, one word, gradually was inserted in 1792 into the bill, and it was accepted by Parliament. And that one word delayed the abolition of the slave trade from 1792 to 1807, 15 years. And I calculated that delay caused about 630,000 Africans to be transported into slavery. If the slave trade was abolished in 1791, then those people would not have been transported. And therefore, I felt that must go on his plaque, because that's what he did. He also controlled the East India Company. He was president. And the money from that company was used so the Indians were taxed, and the tax was used to buy their own goods. So it didn't cost Britain a penny. And Dundas, for example, I checked it, he sent out to India the Duke of Wellington's brother, Lord Wellesley, to get rid of the Sultan of Mysore. And he did. And there's an enormous painting of the Sultan of Mysore in Edinburgh. And one of our historians, very well known, Michael Fry, who wrote a book called The Dundas Despotism. He used that painting of the death of Sultan Mysore on the cover of his book. Because of my attack on them, he's now changed that cover. Changed the cover. So this is this sort of work we're doing. It may not seem that significant, but the fact that this history, which was called despotism in some way, was part of not despotism, it was power. It was to show what we have done and what we could do. And therefore, it was glorification. It was not regret in any way at all. Our slavery was necessary. That's one of the words I picked up in a document from a court case, famous one, called the Joseph Knight case. And I will start with that the present circuit mood is, and the present approach, which I've just noticed was used by David Starkey, who, you know, is a British historian. And he was very negative about slavery, and Cambridge University had to take his fellowship away. But he's a very old, well-established, respected historian. And recently he spoke at Oxford University, probably just a few days ago. And what he was saying was that, you know, equality, what all you're going on about equality. This is a man, historian, speaking at Oxford. He said, for example, there is evidence that there are differences in intelligence between people. Now, where is that coming from? That's coming from David Hume, 1753. David Hume said in 1753, Negroes were inferior to whites. That's the great mind of reason. 1753, he said that. Now that was picked up by Immanuel Kant and turned into the Negro race was inferior. And it is that concept that drove the justification for the enslavement of Black people, because you were less intelligent. And when Hume was confronted that, you know, there was a Black man in Jamaica, I'm not joking, this is a fact, that a Black man in Jamaica had abilities. Hume said he was a parrot. He was imitated. And therefore, this concept of the Black African people being inferior, that's what kills Floyd. That's what affects representation. That's what has been killing Black people for a long, long time. Every person in the world, when they see a Black person, even Black people seeing Black people, we have that view. And that view has progressed even down to Windrush. When I came here, and I tell them that, in 1955, I had to go back to school because I was 1 month short of 15. My mom didn't realize that because she brought me here to work. So I had to go back to school. That's why I'm talking to you today. 1 month. But the authorities said I had to go to school for the 1 month. And when I was taken to school in Islington, the head teacher told my mother that I was educationally subnormal. Educationally subnormal. And thus I had to go to the secondary modern school, but we don't have time for that. You can see that I wasn't quite educationally subnormal. But it is the David Hume statement from 1753 had progressed down to 1955. And a lot of Black kids were designated that during the Windrush, us of the Windrush generation period. And therefore, we still now, because of what's been going on now, and pushing for equality and whatever, you're now getting David Starkey and a lecture I've just listened to 1 hour by Lord Jonathan Sumpton. Look it up. Lord Jonathan something. And when you listen to those guys, the whole thing is creeping back that slavery and colonialism, there were some things that may have been wrong, but there are a whole lot of things that were right. And that is now the academic input. One of my colleagues up here, because of my views about Hume and Henry Dundas, he's threatened to sue me, Sir Tom Devine. And I just told him to go ahead. I'm from bloody Kingston in Jamaica, and I to pay no attention to anybody. If I don't care, I say, you got to kill me. And then he said he told the Times newspaper he's withdrawn it because he didn't want to turn a villain into a victim. And that is now a new mood, that we are changing the whole narrative. And the establishment is now saying they're using what we call the Professor Bigger of Oxford balance. Colonialism did this, but we also did that. We built you schools, we built you roads, you speak English, you know, you're much better off than if you were left in Africa. That was Boswell's statement. Boswell of Boswell and Johnson says the slaves are better off in the Caribbean, better off in the Caribbean than they were in Africa. So that is the new mood of challenging what we're doing, saying, yes, you are inferior. However, look what we've done for you. And we've got to start challenging that wherever we see it. Because if you don't, then in fact, we are going to get a state like the professor from Birmingham who told me, an LBC, race has to be managed. I said, you don't manage murder, you don't manage child abuse or other kinds of criminality. So why are you going to manage race? Race has to go because it's a crime against humanity. That's where it comes from, that slavery. Now, just to, I don't want to hold you up because you've got lots of other people wanting to speak, but we managed to change Henry Dundas's plaque 2 years ago. The council changed it. And when you go to St. Andrew's Square, it's just fascinating to see people, tourists, reading it to say, this statue is now dedicated to those who suffered. 150 feet up. This man delayed the abolition of the slave trade, causing over 500,000 Africans transported into slavery. That's how it starts. Now, some historians are now objecting to the plaque. They want it removed. And 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call from Liverpool where somebody had received a letter from Edinburgh Council that they had a petition, a request from Dundas's family. That's Henry Dundas, first Lord Melville. This is the 10th Lord Melville. He put in a petition to the council that he wants the plaque removed. The council had to have a meeting because of that. That's now the law being used against us as it was used in slavery. He said the plaque must be removed because it's a listed building, the statue. It's over 200 years old. It's a listed building. So even the council doesn't have authority to put anything on it. Using the law now against us. So the council had to have a meeting with their planning. The whole of Edinburgh Council had to have a meeting 2 weeks ago. And they published, which has shocked all of us, that the plaque can be removed. That's what they sent out a letter to everybody. The plaque can be removed. And I just went bonkers. So I checked with a Scottish politician I knew. I said, could you check with the leader of the council what the hell that means? So he did, and he came back. What he said is typical British law. they put in a petition that they want it removed, but the council had to agree that it can be removed because it's a listed building. However, the removal will require the owners of the statue, and the owners of the statue are the people who live around it. And they go back, some of them 200 years. So the possibility of getting them all to agree to the removal of the plaque, the council said it's almost impossible. That is what has saved the statue. So it can be removed, but it will not be removed. That's the conclusion of that. And therefore, that's a story of how you have to fight to get something done. And just finally, quickly, Edinburgh Council had me chairing a slavery legacy review. We completed it. We have 10 recommendations. The first recommendation is an apology from Edinburgh Council, and they've done that. Edinburgh Council has apologized for the city's role in slavery. And there are 9 other recommendations. I've given up the committee, so the new person will have to deliver those 9. Scottish museums and Scottish government project. We looked at the Scottish museums, and a lot of them have got aspects of slavery, Benin masks, Benin bronzes, etc. And Aberdeen University has returned it. And we are now looking at trying to increase representation in the museums. And also the museums must look at what they have and return those things that are unacceptable. I'm presently looking at Edinburgh University. We're still in the process of that in terms of Edinburgh University's involvement. And finally, Glasgow University did do a report, and they've set up educational reparatory links with the Caribbean, University of the West Indies. And professors have been coming over, and I've been meeting them. And they have set up a James McCune Smith Scholarship, the first African-American medical student in the New World. He was a student at Glasgow in 1837. And they've now named a 90.6 million building after James McCune Smith in Edinburgh, in Glasgow. 90.6 million. It's called the James McCune Smith Hub. And they're issuing scholarships for people who want to go to Glasgow University to study. You can apply to Glasgow University now for those scholarships. And finally, just on my side, Edinburgh Council, because of all the trouble I've caused, have given me the Edinburgh Award, which they then put your handprint is on the pavement in gold. Which my granddaughter said to me, "Grandpa, you better not commit a crime now because they've got your handprint." And Leicester University, it's a great honor. I was asked down by the principal, and they've named one of their residences. They call it the Sir Geoff Palmer Building at Leicester University.
Oh,
so my mum, so all this is a result of my mother spending her £86, which she took her from 1951 to 55 in London to earn to bring me here. And we're still now going to do different projects. Royal Bank of Scotland, they've now given the Harriet Watt an award, scholarship award. I've spoken to Bailey Gifford and others, Morgan Stanley. Those companies are now looking at their representation. And Edinburgh Lothians only had 4 Black nurses in management positions. We set up a project, a training project, which I call System Consciousness. Mm-hmm. And we've gone from 4 to 25 in terms of management. So we are making changes, and what you're doing is critical. What everybody's doing is critical. But we must challenge the myths of our history. And we must do work to find out the truth and put it out, because the truth works. We cannot change the past, but we can change the consequences of the past, such as racism, for the better, using education. Thank you.
So, Jeff, you're just an absolute inspiration. You're just an inspiration to me. I am so grateful. That was just fantastic. I've been busily writing notes here. But I'm just going to tell folks that the first time I heard you speak was at the Institute of Jamaica Nationals dinner in Birmingham on Black History Month. And I remember sitting there thinking, I could just listen to Jeff forever, because Jeff understands and can explain the history. I had never experienced that before, that someone who was explaining Black history to me. So you're a true and absolute inspiration to me. What you've done has been nothing less than remarkable up there in Edinburgh. I mean, your whole life's been totally remarkable, and I've talked to you about the possibility of writing a book about your life for children, and that's still on the agenda. But just absolutely fantastic. I had the opportunity to visit you in Edinburgh with Yasser Safari, and that was marvelous. And that understanding of the Dundas statue, the understanding, you took us into Glasgow and you showed us the docks there and helped with that understanding. And I feel it was just fantastic. But what makes me smile from ear to ear from times to time is that you pop up on my TV here in Australia. I didn't know, world superstar Jeff Barber, and I'm there, click click. The last one, Jeff, was when you were on Antiques Roadshow.
Oh yes. In fact, I go to my supermarket now, and I go to supermarkets around the country, and people come up and say, you know, it's the first time they've understood the horrors of this history.
Yes.
And you have to tell people the truth.
Yes.
And what I've tried to do is to tell them the truth. Some people think they won't like it. The fact is that the truth works.
Yes.
And thus I feel completely confident that, you know, we are changing, and what you're doing, don't underestimate it. It is very important, because the truth works. All the fudges don't.
No. Well, thank you so much. That was absolutely remarkable. Garrick, you want to come in?
Just very quickly, these conversations, we've been having regular conversation at lunchtime around Black history, and one of the continual issue that we raise is that Black history is much wider than Black history. It's British history, it's global history, it's world history. And in conversation, you know, we want to at least make sure we're addressing that. It's not restricted to just, you know, a little isolated history somewhere. It's much bigger. And I know Jeff has been doing that in terms of, you know, demonstrating the impact of Black contributions in world history, whether that would be in Scotland, whether that would be in England, whether that would be any part of the world. And we need to maintain those conversations, as you know, it's much bigger than a local. And when you badge Black history, it tends to reduce the audience. If you badge it as global history or as British Black history, you're reaching another audience that you don't normally reach.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. I spoke to Manchester. The lawyers for Windrush asked me to speak to the Manchester Council. And when I went, I did it by Zoom. And what was interesting is that I said to the councillors, have you got a brewery, had a brewery in Manchester called Boddington? Do you have a brewery called Mansfield? And do you have a brewery called Heineken? And then I said, I know Mr. Boddington, I knew him. He asked my advice because my expertise is in brewing. The brewdog owner of beer is my student. and therefore the point is that I know the owner. I worked for him. I knew the Mansfield Brewery. I consulted for them. And that you could see the councillors looking, because they couldn't imagine that I would have anything to do with Boddington's or Heineken or whatever, Mr. Mansfield. And I was the Guinness consultant in Africa. And that is how we change, because people can't imagine that. Guinness asked me to consult in Nigeria, and I changed the grain that Guinness used in Africa to the local African grain. And that change has now changed the whole of agriculture in Africa, because small farmers can sell their grain to big companies like Guinness, Heineken, or South African brewers. Changed the whole economy. And that has come from a little black boy who was born in Almond Town in Kingston, Jamaica, of slave descent.
Amazing. All I can say is I just wish I could pick up a glass and I could go, cheers, Jeff, because I don't drink beer, but there must be millions of people around the world who don't know how much they owe to you. But
especially in Australia, you can always get a drink from any brewery in Australia. Tell them
absolutely.
You're my sister.
Absolutely. Well, I can't thank you enough. They're absolutely fantastic. And I look forward to seeing you pop up on the TV again sometime. But I'm coming back to the UK, drum roll. If I ever get my passport sorted out, I'm coming back from May till September. So that will make life a lot easier to get around and see people. And I hope to come up and see you, Jeff, and catch you. That would be so lovely. I can't thank you enough. Absolutely fantastic, Jeff. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, then. So now we're going to go to my namesake, Melissa Williams. You don't realise, Melissa, but my name was Williams. I come from Wales, so we share that name, which makes me think about what my heritage might involve. So I'm doing a bit of research on that. But there's lots of Williamses I know of Jamaican heritage as well as Welsh heritage. So Melissa, are you okay then sharing your story? Because we've just had the story of Jeff. He's a Windrush boy, if you like. And your stories enabled many people to understand the Windrush story in a very different sort of way, Jeff. But Melissa, over to you then. That's wonderful.
Yeah, of course. So would you like me to still go through my presentation?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So I'll just share my screen. Can you just let me know if you can see?
Yes, I can see it. This is just wonderful. We're here to stay in England.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Oh, what just happened there? Sorry. I think I'm just going to have it like this for some reason. It's not letting me actually, let's see, go on the slideshow.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, no, it's not letting me click over the slideshow properly, unfortunately. So it's just going to have to be like this. Can everybody see it okay?
Yeah, fine, thank you.
Is that okay for everybody? Yeah, okay, perfect.
Lovely.
Minimize my face so that I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, so thank you so much for the kind introduction. As has been mentioned, my name is Melissa Williams, and I'm a first year PhD student based at the University of York. And I'm basically going to be doing a short presentation. I'll try to keep it nice and short because I know we've got some other people who are hopefully going to share their work today as well, on a research project that I did a few years ago, which was focused on the existential impact of the Windrush scandal on British-born Windrush descendants. So just move on to the second slide. Can everybody see this?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so So, as many of you may have noticed, the title of my presentation today, and indeed part of the title of my PhD thesis, starts with a line from a Linton Kwesi Johnson poem, one of the best artists and activists of our time, in my opinion. But what is also worth noting is why I've chosen this specific poem as my title and to start off my presentation today. It is, after all, a poem of resistance against false imprisonment of George Lindo in Bradford in the 1970s after he was framed and jailed for robbery. So, firstly, I see the poem as a call to stand firm in England and to resist racist state oppression through legislation and enforcement. But the poem also has another connection to my work due to the long history of racist oppression in Britain and the ways in which the interconnected structures of oppression operate together and impact different groups. The hostile environment immigration regime in Britain that has so deeply harmed the Windrush community, as well as others, is deeply connected to colonial injustice and subjugation, structural racism, sentencing bias, institutionally racist police forces, the British education system, and capitalism. As highlighted by Paul Gilroy, in many ways the Windrush scandal has been frozen in the mediascape and in doing so has been isolated from the historical injustices and the broader socio-political context. I believe that if we are to truly challenge the hostile environment and tackle the injustices that have been perpetuated, then it is of vital importance to understand and connect the broader context and historical context that surrounds the scandal. Okay. Can I go on to the next slide? Is that okay for everybody as well? Perfect. So I'm not going to focus too much on this, but this is just a little bit of a background of what I've been up to for the past 5 years. As it would seem, I've pretty much not left university. I took a year out, but I have conducted a number of research projects over the past 5-ish years, which aim to address the sort of issues that I've opened up with, really. So particularly focus on nationality and immigration law, the hostile environment, Windrush citizenship, and the colonial structures that are reproduced through contemporary British law. So the research project that I'll focus on today is the second. It's the dissertation that I did for my Applied Human Rights Masters, and it concerns the wide-reaching existential impact of the hostile environment and scandal on British-born Windrush descendants. So, sort of as Jeff has done, I also like to sort of reflect on my background in relation to my research and work. I think it's really important. And it is really my background that's inspired me really and brought me to this topic. So I am a Windrush descendant. My family are originally from St Anne, Jamaica. You can see a little picture there of my amazing and brave grandparents, Lasma and Shirley Williams. So they travelled to Britain in the 1950s from St Anne's in Jamaica, but both of them left Britain with my dad when my dad was a young child. He was 3, and the rest of their children, because of the awful racism that they experienced. They tried to stay in London and deal with it, but it just got to the point where, for their own mental health and sanity, they decided that they were going to raise their children in Jamaica, knowing that because their children had been born in Britain at a time before the just solely right of birthright had been abolished, they had British passports, so they could come back at a later time if they wanted to. So it's important to note that this, as I approach research with the assumption that it's not possible to be neutral or objective, nor is it desirable. My research has the core purpose of developing knowledge to inform activism and trigger positive social change. And this work is informed by post-colonial theory and Black radical thought. And in the spirit of Sivanandan's words, I aim not to simply think for thinking's sake, but think in order to do. Okay, next slide. So the research project, as I said, it was conducted in 2020 and it sits at the intersection of the disciplines of law, politics and sociology, and possibly history as well, although I don't typically refer to myself as a historian. So I did a legal analysis of legislation from the 1940s up until 2020, and I also conducted 10 semi-structured interviews with Windrush descendants. So the central argument of the research in the end was that the hostile environment policy and the Windrush scandal had triggered an existential insecurity among British-born Windrush descendants. So in layman terms, that meant that the scandal confirmed to quite a few descendants that they didn't feel like they belonged here. It eroded their sense of belonging in Britain and had a really negative impact on them. So I've just picked out 3 of the key themes to discuss today. Hopefully I've still got a little bit of time to run through them. But before I do, I'll just mention the historical context, the legislative findings that I think are important to situate within the analysis. So the legislative findings problematise the positioning of the Windrush scandal as a symptom of solely the hostile environment policy. Instead, my research highlighted how the historical use of citizenship and immigration legislation in Britain to exclude racialised people from the former British colonies throughout the 1960s to 80s contributed significantly to the horrific treatment. Long before the hostile environment policy, successive pieces of immigration and nationality legislation intensified in tandem with the collapse of formal empire and operated to exclude racialised people from the former colonies and the Commonwealth from legal comprehensions of Britishness. As highlighted by scholar John Narian and others, citizenship was thus redesigned down the colour line by several immigration nationality acts and operated to exclude predominantly racialised prospective settlers from the former colonies whilst leaving loopholes to citizenship for their white old Commonwealth counterparts. As argued by Amnesty International and Wendy Williams, immigration legislation throughout this period therefore left the generation and their descendants more vulnerable to the social exclusion and citizenship deprivation when compared with those from old Commonwealth backgrounds who were predominantly white. So moving on now to the existential side of things. So as you can see in this slide, there was a real sense of inherited and intergenerational insecurity amongst those that I had interviewed. So that's displayed by this quote: "This impending doom, this feeling, it wasn't based on nothing, it was formed on experience and the things you've seen, you're not welcome here. They knew they would rescind on their promise. It was based on the stuff from years and years ago, promises they made to their parents and their parents." So what came up thematically throughout the interviews was this ancestral fear of racialised state violence and forced repatriation. And this fear was found to not only be rooted in more recent times, so when their family had initially moved over to the country, but it spread all the way back to colonial times, the formal period of empire, and what would be passed down through the Caribbean tradition of storytelling. What also came up, which was really important, was ancestral mistrust of the British government, which again, you know, don't think I need to explain that in much more detail really, but going back to again what had happened historically and the fact that that has continued to impact people in the present day. The second thematic finding that I wanted to talk about was the wide-reaching community impact for the initial project. So none of those interviewed in this project had a close family member who was caught up in the scandal. That's only been for the later projects. So everybody that I spoke to had secure citizenship. They hadn't been put at risk and their family members hadn't. But what they had witnessed is other members of their community have this happen to them. So it's displayed here in this quote: "The policy told me, you're still Jamaican, not British. Please know that you might feel British. You might have no knowledge or recollection of Jamaica, but please don't feel like you're British, because you're not, because at any point we can say go back." And for me, that really showed the wide-reaching impact of the kind of both the discursive narrative surrounding the policies, but also the treatment of members of our community and what that's done amongst others. That was also displayed by another, or articulated, sorry, by another descendant who said, "It affects you in ways that people don't necessarily descend from that background wouldn't understand. Just because it hasn't happened directly to your family, it still hurts, and it's the idea that it's okay for that to happen. It sends a message that you aren't welcome, and these people are our elders." So I'll just quickly run through a few more points on this. I'm conscious I've not got much more time. But again, a key theme here was this fear of future targeting. So this fear that if this could happen to our elders, what would happen to us? What could happen in the future? And also this perceived tolerance based on labour productivity. So the fact that a lot of descendants felt that their elders had been used by the country and discarded throughout the scandal, sort of at a time where they were no longer able to work. So finally, just the kind of last thematic finding that I wanted to talk about today was the aftermath and the compensation scheme. So following the incredible volume of resistance and activism by those impacted, their families, organisations, lawyers and media reporting, the government apologised for the scandal and changed the name of the policy, as many of us will know. But since I conducted the research, just 1 in 4 people who've made claims have been given payouts, 23 people have died waiting this far, and only 26 are estimated to have applied. As displayed in the Wendy Williams progress report, 76% of respondents who applied to either the Windrush scheme or the compensation scheme said that they hadn't been treated respectfully by the Home Office staff, and various other pieces of legislation have been introduced which disproportionately impact those of African Caribbean descent and put them at risk of deportation and citizenship deprivation. And of course, more recently, as many of you will have seen, the Home Secretary has abandoned 3 key recommendations from the Lessons Learned review, which I think is absolutely horrific, considering the fact that those recommendations, in my view, were relatively conservative compared to the violence that's been inflicted on our community, not only through this incident, but historically. So the things I've just talked about were really felt by the people who I interviewed. They felt that the name change was completely superficial and they saw through the government apologies and nothing had really changed in practice. So that did nothing to make them feel more secure in their existential sense of belonging or identity in Britain. They also felt that the scheme was purposefully ineffective and that it was waiting people out effectively. So they had no faith that the government was ever going to right the wrongs, as they've said that they are allegedly doing. So to conclude, this was a quote that was said in 2020 by a participant. Things will get worse, they will come for us next, and who will stop them? And I think that without going into too much detail, we've seen this. We've seen what's happened in the development of legislation since then. Things are getting worse, terrifyingly worse. So this fear, I think, is incredibly well-founded. But I did make some recommendations based on my research, which I think next steps that I've been sharing with activist groups for some time now. So coordinated resistance was one. Continued activism to remove the Windrush scheme and compensation scheme from the Home Office control. Backwards looking activism, so inclusive of everybody of Afro-Caribbean heritage and all racialised peoples from the former colonies and led by lived experience. And the last quote I wanted to end on is a quote by Maya Angelou, is "The truth is, no one of us can be free until everybody is free." And that's something that I like to remind myself when I'm doing this type of research on racist bordering and immigration regimes, is to be inclusive of everybody, because if one of us is being attacked or being targeted through this, I feel like we all are. That's everything I think for today. Thank you so much for allowing me this space to present my research. Sorry that it was a bit quick. You've caught me at the end of a PhD deadline. But no, it was a pleasure to present to you all today.
Melissa, thank you so much. That was really fantastic. And presumably you have that written as a paper, do you? Because it really warrants study and reading it again and again to unpack all those things. So next season, season 9, we're going to devote the time between the departure date of the 85th anniversary in Kingston to the arrival in Tilbury, those weeks. We're going to take the journey, and we're going to be talking about the different aspects of Windrush again, and you're going to join us to share another presentation. But I think it would be well worthwhile, reviewing some of the things that you've been talking about there, because they're so important, really important. Thank you so much. So I don't know if anyone's got any particular points you want to raise with Melissa now. It's been really super so far. We've done so far so well. That's lovely. But now it would be really nice. June Elizabeth has done her presentation and she's going to tell us her story. So if that's all right, and Melissa, do stay with us, or if you need to get on, we quite understand. We've also got other guests popping in and out from time to time. I'm seeing them on the screen, so it's really nice to see people. Melissa, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. June Elizabeth, just
right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Liz. Well, I've decided that with so many people on the screen that I just want to do something completely different and take 5 minutes, so that I can defer mine till another time. Okay. But, so what I'd like to say, I'll just introduce myself. I was born in Northampton of Jamaican parents who were the first Jamaicans to marry in Northampton. So I was Northampton's first Windrush girl. I come from a medical background. I'm a former police officer. I hope when I give my presentation of my life as a Windrush girl, there's a picture of me as a policewoman, and then I can tell you how my brother was framed on 12 charges, and there were 8 police witnesses, 5 police officers. I was the only witness, and I freed my brother without reading statements of the 12 charges. And I left the police, went back to nursing, and the chief constable sent a message that they want me back in the force because they don't want me out with my brain, and that I'll be the youngest chief superintendent in the force. So that didn't happen. I stayed in nursing, then I went into counselling. So what I normally do when I start a presentation, right? So maybe when I do one, I'll get 20 minutes and then I'll give 10 minutes question time. So I had 2 presentations that take 10 minutes each. So what I do at the beginning of my presentation, and I think it's fitting today, I always write a prayer. I always say a prayer, and I've written a prayer, and I'd like to say it for this Black History Conversation 100th session. And then I'd like to just do a toast to Sir Jeff Palmer. Okay, and there's a reason why I would like to do that. So if that's okay, right? My 2 minutes poem and my 1 minute cheers, I think that would be quite fitting. And I just wanted to say thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Professor Palmer. I really enjoyed your presentations, and what I was going to present would just enhance it. Right, so a prayer for the 31st of March 2023. Heavenly Father, a special prayer for the Black History Conversation 100th session. We give you thanks this afternoon and the lives of our communities. Today we pray for world peace, and we pray for good health for all your servants. We pray for our family, friends, and those who mourn, especially still from the effects of the COVID. Let us reach out for the things that matter. Let us walk quietly and lovingly together. Precious Lord, take our hands as we move around your earthly land. Most of all, let us live and treat each other with respect, remembering that we're here for a short while, so not to neglect. Help us to look out for each other. Sometimes just a phone call, WhatsApp or a text will do, or a wave or a smile along the way too. We pray for the homeless, the poor. Look down on us as we continue to walk humbly in your direction. May we prosper in all that our minds are set to do. Give us the spirit of your generosity, enabling the love of God and the fellowship of understanding with each one of us here today. May this gathering be constructive, which it has been, and we continue to another close of day. In your name, Heavenly Father, we praise you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Jean Elizabeth. That was
Right.
really
Now,
beautiful.
I'm a person that will adapt to any situation. And I can remember on the 7th of October 2022, Professor Jeff Palmer was on this platform, right? And he kind of gave like some tips. So I'll only mention half a dozen of them. And he said one of them was retaining names, citywide observation, teaching and learning materials, friends agreements, universities and research bodies encouraged to fund, develop, and an independent legacy. Okay, so I don't know if anybody was on this conversation. I know Liz was. So, and I just love listening to Sir Jeff Palmer. So I'm going to say a special cheers with a tin of Guinness to honour your name. Yes.
Thank you.
And I'm a Black researcher. I have been for many decades, but I just love listening to yourself and anybody else that is in the same game. So cheers. One love. One love. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was just amazing. Thank you so much, June Elizabeth. You're an absolute star, June Elizabeth Whitesmith Gulley. You're a superstar. And good luck with all the studies you're doing and everything else. And thank you for being adaptable. And thank you for focusing on this special session, and it is quite special. I'm just thrilled to bits with it all. I'm just going to ask now if it's all right. If Lisa, are you still awake, dear? Lisa in Austin, Texas?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Lisa.
Yes, I'm here.
Just give us a little bit of a flavour of what you're doing in completing this PhD, which is on the fascinating subject of wool, because we've Lisa and I have linked together on a number of occasions, and we were doing a project in North Wales about the production of cloth for the slave trade, looking at the commodities that went out through Liverpool. And Lisa's work has taken it all around the world, and I met her here in Melbourne very briefly just before COVID, so that's 3 years now. Amazing. Yes. I believe the time's gone by. But first of all, are you safe, Lisa? We just hear such stories of the weather you're getting over in the States.
Yes, things are wonderful. Listen, I want to say, first of all, I am humbled to be in the midst of such wonderful researchers and people who are doing things in real time and not just looking at the past, but really forging a future. And so I am quite humbled to be in your midst. And I learn every time from every one of you and all that you contribute. And so I feel as though none of us ever stop learning and ever stop growing. And I just so appreciate that everyone shares what you learn so that we can all be a little better stewards of this time that we have to make a difference. So I hope in some small bit I am still working to do that myself. As Liz mentioned, I am trying to put together a bit of history on the impact of this empire building period and how it includes the use of wool and its continuity throughout this period, with whether it be the subjugated, the enslaved, or the convicted, and how that is all pieced together through individual lives and people who won't have their names on plaques or buildings or anywhere that the public would find them notable, and yet they're so integral in legacies. So I am in the midst of my 5th chapter and hope to have this defended by the end of the year. But I stay committed to the idea that what all of you are doing seems so much larger and bigger. And so I thank you for letting me be a part of your audience.
Well, I think it's it's truly delightful that you were able to join us, Lisa, and the fact that you've also shared about the work we're doing over there in the States, and your work is fascinating. It's been incredible. Over the 100 sessions, we've had far more than 100 people present, because some sessions, I got into trouble about this, but some sessions I had 4 speakers organised, so that was a bit heavy. So we tried to prune it down, and 2 was good. Some weeks we didn't manage anybody, but we still had a really good conversation. So Lisa, your work has taken us along the exploration about commodities, the things that made it possible for the slave trade to operate and slavery to be perpetuated. And we also, Simon Faringo has spoken to us about cotton, that's his special area. We had Robert Burrows talking to us about gunpowder. Now that was a really amazingly interesting story. There's no point making all these guns if you haven't got any gunpowder and cannons and things. So looking at the different things and looking locally, and Jeff Palmer's work looking locally in Scotland has been a real inspiration. I've said enough inspiration about you, Jeff, but that idea of looking locally, really good. So now, excuse me, so thank you, Lisa. So I'm just going to, Linford, do you want to just say something now while I cough?
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
And particularly to Sir Jeff Palmer, who I met in 2015 in Manchester when he spoke at the the Pan-African Congress anniversary.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
And he's also, a friend of mine, Dwayne Neal.
Yes.
Now, yeah, and I'm just listening to all this wonderful information. I'm busily writing. It's wonderful. Now, I'm interestingly enough, I'm Jamaican as well. I've been in Britain for almost 60 years now. I came here as a child from Clarendon, which is Beckford Crawl, not far from Pennant. And I was born in that area in Chapelton. Now, my mother helped me to understand my genealogy. And she talked about her grandmother and her 2 times great-grandfather. And she told me that her 2 times great-grandfather was a slave. And he came on a ship from Africa. She didn't actually mention Africa, but she said he came over on a ship. I don't think she knew too much about Africa at that time. And I then later on became a genealogist and started researching. And I researched my family and eventually found my 3 times great-grandfather, who was my mother's 2 times great-grandfather, and found out she was right. And she was right about his name. She was right about everybody. And so that got me into genealogy, and particularly Jamaican genealogy, which I still do today. And I have clients now. However, that then got me into history. I started thinking, well, I need to know more about the history, because to understand Caribbean genealogy, you had to understand the history and slavery and all of that. And that led me to learning more about African history and now Black British history. And so now I teach history all over, mainly in Manchester, but online I teach history to people anywhere, including Tanzania, Ghana, Nigeria, Uganda. And it's just fascinating to realize that people don't fully understand their history even in Africa. And so I run these courses, but recently, so that I don't go on too recently, in 2018, I was involved in helping helping with the Windrush 70th anniversary. And this year I decided Windrush 75, something has to happen. So I brought together a couple of 3 people, and we've decided to set up a Windrush, a Greater Manchester Windrush coordinating group. And as a result of that, we've now got the whole of June almost booked up, you know, which is fantastic. For instance, just to give you an example, Lord Kitchener's plaque is going to actually be unveiled in Trafford. And in Trafford, there isn't one black person's plaque. In Manchester, there are a few, but not in Trafford. So Lord Kitchener is going to be unveiled. We've also got Professor Les Henry coming up to speak, hopefully on Windrush. We've just decided that today, and that's in collaboration with the University of Manchester. We've got a Windrush Day, which has been organized for many years now, and that's going to be a whole day, which probably will include cricket, dominoes, everything. And we've got the whole community getting involved. So that's what we're about at the present moment. But my main emphasis is on history, particularly teaching the youngsters about history so they can move on. They can go on to actually teach it to their children. Thank you very much.
Linford, thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. And Linford, hopefully things are a bit better for you. I know you've been through a really rough time, and I don't want to ask you about that, but hopefully things are better.
Things are better.
Oh, good,
I'm
well,
very grateful. I'm blessed. Things are better now.
Good. Well, I'm thinking of you. So what we're doing is putting together the programme for season 9 and booking people in advance. Now that might sound a bit obvious, but during these 100 sessions, we've done it week by week generally. And occasionally we'll book somebody in advance a few weeks and then they forget to turn up, or we forget that they're turning up, or anyway, we've done it on a week by week basis, but we are now trying, because I'm going to be back in the UK mainly, that we need to get our act together and get it organised. So for our 75th anniversary activities, we're going to have a number of sessions. So Linford, I'll communicate on email and we'll set a date. It would be great for you to talk more about the things that you've been doing, and that's wonderful. And also, Linford, Beckford Crawl is very close to Pennants, where the North Wales Jamaica Society and the Jamaica Wales Alliance have been focusing. So tomorrow is well, in 5 minutes it'll be tomorrow, so I'll be there already on April the 1st. We're going to have the North Wales Jamaica Society first Saturday in the month meeting. So I'll send you an invitation to that if that's okay. And I think most of the rest of you have probably already received that if you don't know. So we link with, we do it later on. It starts at about, I don't know what time it is in the UK. It's later in the afternoon. It's about 3 o'clock.
Yeah, it'd be 3 o'clock now. Yeah, it'd be 3 o'clock. Because we've put the
folks in. Let me just find the PowerPoint, and while I'm rambling on about this, might as well show you.
Liz, I'm going to go now. Okay. I've got a thing in 5 minutes.
That's all right. Well, thank you so much, Sir Jeff. It's just brilliant. Brilliant.
Not a problem. And God bless everybody, and happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Being 100's great.
I'm going to send you a card like the Queen.
All right, then. Send me a card, please.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Bye. What good.
As you can see, there's no difference in hardly these two photographs between North Wales and Jamaica. So it's 3 o'clock in Wales, and it's the same time in England, most of you realise. And it's 9 o'clock in Jamaica. That's why we have to have it so later on in the afternoon. And goodness knows when it is here. So you're very welcome to join this if you want to. I'm just going to stop sharing and just show you a bit more of the PowerPoint if I find the right bit. And this is kind of specially for you, Linford, but others may well be interested too. So go into Zoom, share, and Wilton is educating us on the chat thing with all sorts of things. Thank you very much indeed, Wilton. Right, okay, this is well, Linford, so you know, I don't know if you know the Denby Plantation. Well, the Denby Agricultural Showground was the Pennant's Denby Plantation, so that's
my uncle lived in Denby.
Oh, right. Well, we have got very close links with Denby and Maypen, and we meet every week. You're very welcome to join us.
My family are all over Clarendon.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Well, because we want to follow up to find out where the other plantations were, because we're looking at reparation funding now from Richard Douglas Pennant. Can you see the little guy here in the middle next to us?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
This is Richard Douglas Pennant, and we're just trying to negotiate how to transfer the money over. And they're talking about building an infant department for the school in Pennants, but we also need to look at some of the other stories and the other areas, so and look at other ways that we can help, and also with other reparation funding, who knows, you know, what we can influence and how we can help. And I know Sir Jeff knows a lot about this, but he's had to move on to another meeting now. So the Pennants Project, we've looked at the strong historical links. Now, when my friend Caroline joined us just now, I don't know if you could see, but she actually had Penryn Castle in the background. She was going to be in a meeting in Penryn Castle, which was the Pennant family home, and she was going to try and just say a few words to her, but that didn't work out. She needed to move on. So we've got very strong links, because it's quite iconic, because the Pennant family, Gifford Pennant, went out in 1655 and stayed there. After a few generations in the late 1700s, his family returned to Wales, and they came in at that sort of higher level of society because they'd got so much money. So that was a really interesting bit of the story. The fact, and then they stayed all the way. They owned the plantations right through to 1940. And so what we're looking at the moment, we've got the Jamaican High Commissioner and his wife there at Bangor Archives, and they're looking at some of the maps. Now, in Bangor Archives, they've got a new device which is on the ceiling, so I'm pointing up at the top, and it will look down on these maps, and it will show us on the Zoom screen, so we can screen share and what have you. And hopefully that's going to be next Wednesday that we're actually going to start looking at some of these wonderful resources, which will make research between Jamaica and Wales, Bangor University, very much easier. So this is the session that we're going to do, but so we've got all of us linked in here, North Wales Jamaica Society and Jamaica Wales Alliance. But these documents here, this one that's particularly interesting, because this is the 2nd of June 1939, and it's Baron Penryn, Hugh Napier, read the Jamaica Estate, and this is the declaration of the sale. And so we're having the first Black History Conversations on the 21st of April. Is going to be a conference session, a long session like this, and it's going to be about the tenants strike, the tenants in the Pennants community, the tenants went on strike, and the strike caused the Pennant family to sell their plantations, and they went on strike in 1938. So this is the 85th anniversary. It's on the 23rd actually, which is a Sunday. But that's going to give us an opportunity to get together some of the leading experts and really start to research this incredible project, which shows the determination of folks in Jamaica. Your forefathers, Linford, might have been part of it, I don't know, but it was a time of the resistance across the Caribbean against the imperial rule. Absolutely fascinating story. So I'm not going to go on and on, which I can do about this.
I did a talk on the resistance in the 1930s and 40s. And interestingly enough, an area that is quite close to Pennants is called Coxon.
Yes, yes.
My good friend has a page on Facebook for all the people who came from Pennants and Coxon. So I might actually, it would be good if he could actually.
You have a word with Bernard Burrell and say, why hasn't he?
Bernard. Oh, right.
Yeah,
okay.
On the Facebook page.
Yeah,
and why hasn't he appeared on the sessions? Yes, that would be really good. So, together, I think we can get an awful long way with that project. But it's so iconic, taking it back to Wales, because it so clearly explains what happens. It's such an obvious story. So we're working with the National Trust and got them involved, and instead of these arty crafty lovely exhibitions that are put on to tell the stories, we need some facts and information, straightforward, no one messing around and making. They made a replica of Penrhyn Castle out of sugar. Well, it was very clever, but
yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Linford. We look forward. Now, Tayo, are you happy to? You've waited so long and been listening intently like me. Tayo, tell us a bit about what you've been doing and do.
Right. Hello. There are one or two people here who do not know me, so I will say that I am based in Liverpool. I was born in Nigeria, been in England since 1978. I worked as an architect, but nowadays I am an actor, singer, writer, and producer. And I am probably best known for two one-man plays that I have written and I toured nationally and internationally. The first one is about Paul Robeson, whose picture adorns my wall behind me. Great African-American actor, singer, and activist. And the second one is one which uses the life of Britain's first black judge, who was a Nigerian, who was a singer, and who was passionate about cricket, to look at Black history and Black liberation struggles through the eyes of someone who's not really into politics. He considers himself just an ordinary lawyer, which is the title of the play. So where I am now is that next week, Friday, I fly to the United States to do a single concert in Detroit in commemoration of Paul Robeson's 125th anniversary. And that concert has been arranged and just plunked at the very beginning of the tour, which follows. So that concert is next Saturday. Paul Robeson's 125th birthday is actually Sunday, April 9th. And then from Monday onwards, Monday to Saturday, the following week, I am joining with a group of jazz musicians. I am not a jazz musician, but I'm part of the tour. And this group of jazz musicians have a tour which they're calling Freedom First, which is music written, inspired by the story of an African-American man who is barely 2 or 3 years younger than me, who has been on death row in Ohio for almost 30 years, even though he's innocent. His name is Keith Lamar. And thanks to the gift of art, I was performing something on Langston Hughes in Northumberland maybe about 8 years ago. And a woman in the audience said to me, after, spoke to me afterwards and said, I have a friend in the US who loves Langston Hughes. He's on death row. He'd love to hear your work. He'd love to be in touch. And she gave me his address. And it took me 3 years to drum up the courage to write Keith Lamar, because what do you say to a man who has a death sentence and his date of death is known? But I finally wrote to him, and he wrote back immediately, and we've been friends ever since. And he is a perfect illustration of what I call the complete upside downness of this world. Because this is a beautiful man, an intelligent man, who even from within death row and solitary confinement is able to communicate with young people, primarily around the United States, and teaching young men who, like him, had limited life choices. And he has helped form book clubs, and he reads books with young people on the outside, all over the United States. So these musicians, and his story is actually gaining traction all over the world. And this is like a tour highlighting his plight. And he will actually be phoning in from death row onto the tour, and in fact, to my concert on Saturday. And he asked me to write a monologue. So at the beginning of each concert, I'll do 5 minutes, and at the end, I'll do another 5 minutes. And what I have written is something called Where Are the Children?, which basically refers to the fact that my father told me the story of his grandfather, my great-grandfather, having escaped being sold into slavery. And I say that if my grandfather hadn't actually killed the person who was taking him away, I might actually be an African American. I might actually be somebody who could be on death row myself, or could be shot and killed just because of the color of my skin. So I'm relating my story of having the freedom to leave Ohio, I hope, in a few weeks, to the possibility and having the ability to tell a story of an ancestor. And I'm relating that to the children, saying, who are the children of the people who incarcerate and want to kill Keith Lamar? So that's the most immediate thing I'm doing. I am doing a few performances of Just an Ordinary Lawyer in Liverpool and London. And I'm actually in the process of trying to get it to tour. One of those performances is going to be on Windrush Day, June 22nd, at the Caribbean Centre here in Liverpool. And I am trying to get it to tour the University of the West Indies, because this is also the 75th anniversary of the formation of the University of the West Indies. And called Mr. Robeson, I will be doing in July, I think it is. But I will put my website in the chat so that people can stay in touch with me. And I have newsletters which I will very happily share. So there we are.
Thank you so much. That's absolutely brilliant. It's just amazing what you're doing. I'd like to ask if when you get back and you're not too overwhelmed with things, if you could join us again and tell us how it all went with you over in the States. That would be absolutely amazing.
I would love to, yes.
That would be lovely. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, I'd
So-
just like to say, excuse me, I'd just like to say, if anybody has not seen this gentleman, if he's in your area, you must go and see him. He came to Wellingborough twice, I might have mentioned before, and my husband hardly comes out, but he came out for Mr. Robson and Paul Robson, and that extraordinary, just an ordinary lawyer. That was fantastic, you know. So I really appreciate you very much, and I wish you all the best on your travels.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All the
Thank
very
you.
best to you. All the very best. Thank you so much. That's just marvelous. Okay, that's lovely. So it's your name and friends.com come up on the chat. So that's really lovely. People can check that out. All right. Garrick, I just wondered if you wanted to say a few words, and then I was going to ask Wilton. Wilton's been posting.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Good afternoon. Just a few things. Having listened to the contribution thus far, it's been a very informative session. You know, we could go on with these sessions. The contents of what we're talking about, we could go on for another couple of hours, but we haven't got the time. Just a couple of things to mention. Firstly, Tayo would know this. We attended a funeral yesterday in Liverpool of one of our Liverpool, we'll probably say legend, Dave Clay. And the reason I mentioned Dave Clay, I worked with Dave Clay and Ray Costello when they were director of education and assistant of education for the city council. And Dave has written a book. Well, it's not a new book, but there's a book out there that actually captures 100 years from 1919 to 1999 about the Liverpool history, Liverpool local history being told. You can get the book on Amazon, and it's well worth, you know, having a look at the publication. One of the things, if I just show you so you could see, there it is.
Okay, yeah, we can see a bit of that. Liverpool Black History in 100 years, 100 years,
yes,
yeah?
1919 to 1999. So it's well worth a read. That's the first thing. And also, he was a musician. He loved music, loved Motown and soul. And the funeral, that's what they play. They play the soul music and the Motown music at the church. And afterwards, they followed the same thing with the music. And they had some live performance and, you know, people that play with Dave. And that was really nice. So that's local in Liverpool. Just a couple of things to note. Next Thursday, the 6th of April, is the 5th anniversary of the Windrush scandal. And there is a national vigil from 1 till 3 in Windrush Square, Brixton, London, Southwest 2. Next door to the Black Archives. So there will be contribution from MPs, trade unions, community groups, activists, and so forth. So that's something to note. And you probably will see being televised on the TV channel on the day or in the evening.
Excuse me, Gareth. Excuse me, Gareth. Can you let them know who organised it?
Yes.
That's interesting.
So the vigil has come together as a result of a group coming together, Windrush National Organization, Patrick Vernon, Windrush Justice for Windrush Generation, and Windrush Lives have come together to pull this event to mark the 5th anniversary. And it's interesting because the 5th anniversary is really to say that the hostile environment is continuing, but more importantly, it's also to recognize some of those people, some of those Windrush people who have fallen asleep in death, who have passed on. And we haven't got a full figure, but it's approximately around 30 people from the UK that we know of that have died. We don't know the global figure. We just haven't got that figure at all. We may get some new information on the day, but families from, individual families would be represented at the vigil. And we can think of, Paulette Wilson from Wolverhampton and her family. There are others. So, and the idea that we will have tea light candles, and they'll be lit, and they will have words about justice, so you'll be able to see. We'll take a photograph and we'll post those photographs of the tea light, and there's contribution from church leaders. It's not a choir, but there is contribution from church leaders on the day. So that's the 6th of April. The other thing that we need to mention is that we're continuing the bi-monthly rally in Parliament. Our next date is the 17th of May in Westminster. We're building up really good relationship with MPs to make sure that we're having these conversations, and they know that these issues are still unresolved. So we continue with the rally of Parliament. And then finally, just to say, although it is 75th anniversary, and I know there are activities planned across the country, it's not the time for celebration, because a lot of our people are suffering as a result of the hostile environment. And I know that, there will be activity that will encompass some celebration, but it is not a celebratory thing at all. We're still fighting for justice for the Windrush generation and descendants, and we will continue to do that. The hostile environment has been strongly, again, reinforced by the Home Secretary with her will to remove people to Rwanda by summer. And so, we have to keep up the fight. So all those who were fighting for social justice, keep that fight going, and you're not alone. We have to come together in solidarity on this issue. We're also encouraging cross-party coalition and solidarity. We're not just dealing with, the Labour Party or the Liberal. We're trying to build a coalition of MP, those who, support right, justice, fairness. We're trying to build that. So, again, we say to people, write to your MP and express your frustration with the way the system been treating the Windrush generation. If we get a lot of people expressing that to your MP, a local MP, regardless of what constituency or what persuasion they are, just make it known. That will help the argument. And we don't believe we'll get much movement under the current administration of the Tory party. So we're looking to the new administration come 18 months time with the general election. So that's where we're heading. So we need to build this solidarity and coalition as we move towards that.
Yes, sorry, Gareth. Gary, would you be able to put, the email address of, because because it's the 100th anniversary session,
Yeah.
I think if you could put the email address, because I don't know if you mentioned the Friends of Windrush Square
Yes.
and Northampton Windrush Generation Descendants UK
Yes.
as part of the organisation. But if you could put Friends of Windrush Square at gmail.com into the chat
Yeah.
for any more information in case
Yeah.
anybody wants to.
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
We've got the final meeting this
Tonight.
afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah. 5:30. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. So we're going to start wrapping things up now with lots of thank yous to all of you who've contributed. Melissa's getting on her way. She says thank you for inviting her. Congratulations on the 100th session. So thank you very much indeed, Melissa. And various other colleagues have had to move on. Unfortunately, Wilton's moved on. Wilton MacDonald, Dr. Wilton MacDonald's doing some amazing work about the origins of Black people in Europe. And he's been traveling around in Scotland and the islands off Scotland and looking at information. So what I'm saying to him is if he can simplify down what he's doing, because it's extraordinarily complicated, he's doing all sorts of stuff with DNA analysis and all sorts. When he's got it brought down to a level that is a bit more understandable, that would be brilliant. But he took the opportunity to share a lot of stuff on the chat, so I've kept a copy of all of that, so if people are interested. Anyway, all right, okay then. Well, all I can say is thank you very much indeed. It's just been incredible that people are interested and willing to join us to talk, because especially my colleagues from Justice for Windrush Generations and the Northamptonshire Windrush group and every other group you're involved in, June Elizabeth, they're all represented through you. So Garrick and June Elizabeth, many, many thanks. Very special indeed. And for those of you who've managed to stick with it, including Lisa in Austin, Texas, thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you, Tayo. Safe travels. And thank you, Linford. And I hope things carry on going okay with your family and your challenges. And finally, Simon, thank you very much indeed. Absolutely fantastic that you've kept going all this time. So we've got a 2-week break now over Easter, and then we'll get going again. And I need to talk to you about what time it is. So the next session. So Simon, can you stop the recording now?